I am Zane, and I want to ask you one question before we start. If someone you knew had $1 million invested, do you think you would be able to tell just by looking at them? Most people get this completely wrong. I did too, because here is what nobody tells you about crossing seven figures. The world does not throw a parade. Your neighbors do not notice. Your colleagues do not clap. The barista who makes your coffee every morning treats you exactly the same way she did when your account had $11,000 in it. And the reason for that is one of the most psychologically fascinating and genuinely useful truths in all of personal finance. People do not respond to wealth. They respond to signals of wealth. And $1 million sitting inside a brokerage account produces absolutely no signal whatsoever. But here is the twist that this entire script is built around. While strangers cannot tell, and while most people in your life will never know, one specific person starts treating you radically differently the moment you cross that line. And it is not who you expect. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you will understand something about money and human psychology that most people spend their entire lives never figuring out. What $1 million actually means right now. Before we get into how people treat you, we need to be honest about what this number actually represents in 2026, because the word millionaire is carrying about 40 years of cultural baggage that no longer matches reality. $1 million in purchasing power today is not what it was a generation ago. Adjust for inflation, and today's $1 million portfolio represents roughly the purchasing power of $400,000 in the early 90s. The mental image most people carry of a millionaire, the yacht, the vacation home, the effortless lifestyle, was formed during a period when that number meant something categorically different. Surveys asking Americans what net worth qualifies as genuinely wealthy consistently produce answers well above $2 million, which means Zane has crossed a genuinely significant threshold, top 3% of American adults by investable assets, while simultaneously falling short of what most people around him would even define as rich. And here is the stat that should reshape everything you think you know about who actually gets here. 79% of American millionaires inherited exactly nothing. Only 3% inherited over $1 million. A full third of them never earned six figures in any single year of their lives. The most common professions among American millionaires are engineer, accountant, and teacher. Not hedge fund manager, not tech founder, teacher. So the millionaire in this story is not some abstract wealthy person with advantages you do not have. Statistically, it's a future version of you, if you want it to be, and if you are willing to be boring enough for long enough to get there. Drop a comment right now telling me where you are on the journey. Are you just starting, somewhere in the middle, or closer than you think? I read every single one. Why strangers cannot see it. Zane crossed $1 million on an unremarkable Thursday morning. He was standing in his kitchen making coffee when he checked his phone and saw the number. He stood there for about 30 seconds. Then he finished making the coffee and drove to work. In his 7-year-old car, with the small scratch above the rear wheel he's never bothered to fix. His colleagues said good morning. His manager asked about a project deadline. The sandwich place downstairs charged him the same price for the same lunch. Not a single interaction in his day was different from any other Thursday of his adult life. And this is not a coincidence. This is the architecture of how human beings actually perceive and respond to each other. Research into social status signals reveals something almost embarrassing about our species. We are not responding to what people have. We are responding to what people display. Studies examining how visible brand logos on clothing change social interactions found that the same person wearing a shirt with a recognizable luxury logo received measurably higher status ratings, more compliance with requests, better evaluations in mock interviews, and nearly double the charitable donations compared to wearing an identical shirt without the logo. A small embroidered symbol changed how complete strangers behaved towards a complete stranger. But here's the detail that matters most. The logo did not make people perceive the wearer more trustworthy, more likable, or more worth knowing as a person, only more expensive.
Strangers grant deference to wealth signals. They do not grant genuine regard. And Zayn's $1 million, sitting inside an index fund, emits no signal of any kind. The waiter cannot see it. His co-workers cannot see it. The guy at the car dealership cannot see it. Every social interaction Zayn has today is structurally identical to the one he would have had at $20,000. The world is organized entirely around projection, not possession. And what genuinely wealthy people project, according to decades of research into actual high-net-worth households, is aggressively, almost defiantly ordinary. The most common vehicle among American millionaires is not a German luxury brand. It is a Ford pickup truck. Nearly half of millionaires have lived in the same house for more than 20 years. The people with the most money are consistently sending the fewest signals, while people with significantly less spend meaningful portions of their income maintaining appearances that suggest more than they actually have. The BMW in the office parking lot is not evidence of wealth. It is frequently evidence of a monthly payment that is quietly preventing wealth from ever arriving. What happens the moment you tell someone? Here is where the video stops being about psychology and starts being about real-life consequences. Because while strangers cannot treat you differently, the people who know you absolutely can. And the data on what happens when you tell them is not encouraging. Zayn told his closest friend over dinner 6 weeks after crossing the milestone. It felt natural. It felt like sharing something genuinely meaningful with someone he trusted completely. Within 2 months, that friend mentioned, carefully, apologetically, that he was navigating a difficult financial situation and wondered whether Zayn might be in a position to help temporarily. The amount was significant. Zayn handled it gently, and the immediate conversation ended without damage. But something shifted at that dinner table that has not fully unshifted. His friend now calculates him differently in every money conversation they have. Not maliciously, not with bad intent, just differently. Research tracking what happens to relationships after money moves between people who care about each other finds that 3 out of 4 of those relationships become measurably less close afterward. 3 out of 4. The damage is not always dramatic or loud. Sometimes it just looks like a subtle recalibration in how someone who loves you thinks about your situation relative to theirs. There is also a documented psychological pattern called tall poppy syndrome. The tendency for people to feel genuine discomfort when someone at your level pulls significantly ahead. It's not jealousy exactly, it's something more specific and more uncomfortable. The people most affected by your financial progress are not strangers. They are the people who started at the same point and watched you diverge. This is why actual self-made millionaires describe their experience in anonymous interviews. The same sentence appears over and over regardless of the person, the amount, or the circumstances. Nobody knows. The financial independence community has a name for the lifestyle that produces this outcome: stealth wealth. It is the practice of building and holding significant assets while maintaining a presentation indistinguishable from someone with considerably less. It is not dishonesty. It is the rational response to a very clear asymmetry. Getting strangers to treat you better requires signals you have to fake with logos and lease payments. Getting people who know you to treat you worse requires nothing more than the truth. The system is genuinely rigged in that direction. So, the mathematical optimal move at $1 million is silence. The biggest financial achievement of your life and the correct play is to never mention it at Thanksgiving. But here's the exception I promised you. There is one specific context in which Zayn's $1 million does change how people treat him, not because anyone in the room knows about the portfolio, but because of what the portfolio has done to Zayn himself. That context is his professional life, and the mechanism is subtle enough that almost nobody who experiences it fully understands why it is happening. Financial planners describe a concept called walkaway money, the amount of invested assets at which you no longer genuinely fear losing your job. Using the 4% withdrawal rule, a $1 million portfolio generates approximately $40,000 annually, essentially indefinitely. Updated research from the researcher who developed that rule suggests the real sustainable figure is closer to 4.7%. call it $47,000 per year. Your portfolio has quietly become a second income source that never calls in sick, never asks for a raise, and has never once complained about the office temperature. And here's what that does to your behavior at work, in ways you may not even consciously notice. You stop performing enthusiasm you do not feel. You stop laughing at things that are not funny because the person who said them has influence over your continued employment. You stop absorbing unreasonable requests without pushback because the alternative no longer feels catastrophic. You negotiate compensation like someone who can genuinely afford to hear no, because you literally can. You say the true thing in the meeting instead of the safe thing. And then something happens that Zane didn't anticipate. People around him started reading all of this as confidence, as capability, as the kind of quiet authority that makes people want to listen and defer and promote. His manager doesn't know about the portfolio. His colleagues don't know about the portfolio. They simply observe a person who carries himself like someone with options, and we instinctively defer to people with options in ways we cannot fully explain and rarely examine. Zane got treated better at work. He got listened to more carefully.
He got considered for things he had not been considered for before. And everyone, including Zane, initially attributed it to professional growth and increasing competence. The actual source was a brokerage account that nobody in the building knew existed. The money never entered the room. What it sent instead was a version of Zane who no longer needed the room to go a particular way. The twist nobody sees coming. Here is the actual revelation at the center of this entire story. The person who treats Zane most differently after $1 million is not a stranger. It is not a colleague. It is not a friend or family member. It is Zane. And not always in the ways he expected. Research examining what wealth, or even just the perception of wealth, does to behavior and self-perception reveals a consistent and somewhat uncomfortable pattern. People who feel wealthier become louder. They attribute outcomes more heavily to their own skill and less to circumstance or luck. They consume more of shared resources without noticing. These findings have had a complicated path through academic replication and should be held carefully rather than treated as absolute truth. But the directional pattern, that crossing into genuine financial security changes not just your circumstances, but your psychology, appears consistently enough to take seriously. For Zane, the shift has felt less like arrogance and more like the gradual removal of a background noise he had stopped noticing because it had been present every day for 15 years. The low-grade financial anxiety that occupies cognitive and emotional bandwidth in ways you cannot fully account for until it disappears. The ongoing mental calculation of whether the unexpected thing is manageable or catastrophic. The background assessment running beneath every decision about whether the plan still holds. When that noise goes quiet, the space it occupied becomes available for something else. Attention, presence, patience with problems that used to feel more urgent than they actually were. Research on well-being and financial security has been significantly revised in recent years. An earlier, widely cited finding suggested happiness stopped increasing with income at relatively modest levels. More recent work tracking real-time emotional states across enormous samples finds that well-being continues rising with financial security well beyond those earlier thresholds for the majority of people. What the stack buys, more than anything else purchasable, is the permanent retirement of a specific category of fear. The check engine light becoming an errand instead of an emergency. The difficult conversation at work becoming just a conversation. The unexpected expense becoming a line item rather than a disruption to the entire month. None of this is visible from the outside. It produces no signal. It cannot be detected by strangers or colleagues or the barista or anyone at Thanksgiving. The world keeps treating Zane exactly the same, and Zane has come to understand that this is not a disappointment. It is the entire design, the loneliness cost nobody mentions. There is one more dimension to this that deserves honesty, because most conversations about financial success skip it entirely. $1 million can be quietly lonely, not because the money creates distance, but because the secrecy required to protect it does.
When the people around you are navigating financial stress, rent increases, unexpected bills, the ongoing arithmetic of income that does not quite match expenses, and you're no longer navigating those stresses, a gap opens in every money conversation you have. Your friend describes a financial worry, and you respond with genuine empathy, while privately knowing your version of that problem resolved itself years ago. Your family discusses financial constraints at gatherings, and you navigate how much of your own reality to bring into the room. People who have carried significant quiet wealth for years describe it consistently as a decade or more of feeling like they were holding something real that could not be put down or shared without consequences. The rational choice and the comfortable choice are not always the same choice. That is the honest cost. It's worth knowing before you get there what it is all actually worth. So, does it change how people treat you? Strangers treat you exactly the same because they respond to logos and lease payments, not brokerage balances. People who know you treat you the same if you're disciplined enough to stay quiet, and measurably worse if you're not. Your professional world treats you better, but only because the security changed how you carry yourself, not because anyone can see the number. And you treat yourself differently, with more calm, more clarity, and a quiet confidence that has no crocodile logo and needs no audience. The reward for building real financial security was never the applause. It was always the specific internal quiet of a Tuesday where something goes wrong and the only thing required is to handle it. No calculation, no background noise, no 2 a.m. arithmetic about whether this month works. Just the thing, handled, and then the rest of the day continuing normally. That's what $1 million actually buys. Not a different life from the outside, a fundamentally different experience of the same life from the inside. And that's a prize nobody can take, tax, or borrow at the holidays. Now I want to hear from you. If you crossed $1 million tomorrow and could only tell one person, who would it be? Or would you tell nobody at all? Drop your answer in the comments right now, because I genuinely read every single one, and the answers to this question are always more interesting than people expect. Hit the like button if this shifted how you think about what you're building toward, and subscribe to Wetrix Invest, because next time we're going even deeper into the psychology of wealth that nobody else is talking about, and you don't want to miss it.